Hi everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel Dr.Sreenivas Medical Concepts and my FB page Dr. Sreenivas Concepts. This is Dr. Sreenivas, neurologist from Andhra Pradesh, India. I am also the medical author of the book Focused Neurology. Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, glucose and its neurological significance. Glucose and its neurological significance. So why is glucose so important? The brain depends very much on glucose and oxygen for its survival. The brain depends very much on glucose and oxygen for its survival. Brain needs glucose on a continuous basis. Brain needs glucose on a continuous basis, and therefore the mother nature has designed specific transport systems for glucose to enter into the brain from the blood. Because normally many substances which are present in the blood cannot enter the brain because of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier, which is a barrier between the blood on one side and brain on the other side, is very, very important. Otherwise, any toxic substance which is present in the blood will diffuse into the brain and can cause toxic encephalopathy. And therefore, Mother Nature has designed a very important and a nice protective mechanism in the form of the blood-brain barrier. The blood-brain barrier is the barrier between the blood on one side and the brain on the other side. It basically consists of the tight endothelial junctions of the blood vessel on one side, which is where underneath of which is the basement membrane, and on the side of the brain we have astrocyte foot process. Because of these tight endothelial junctions and because there is no gap between the endothelial junctions, substances which are present in the blood cannot enter into the brain. This is called as the blood-brain barrier. Good. It's a protective mechanism. It will not allow many substances to enter into the brain so as to prevent toxic encephalopathy. But what about substances like glucose and oxygen? They are very essential for the brain. As I said earlier, brain needs glucose on a continuous basis. So, Mother Nature has designed specific transport systems which are known as glucose transporters. So, we have specific glucose transporters in the blood which take the glucose in the blood and transport it to the brain. These are also present in the blood CSF barrier where the glucose is transported from the blood into the CSF, because glucose is very important for brain. It's a nutrient for the brain. Right. So this is a very important concept. So brain depends on glucose for its survival, and glucose has to be supplied to brain on a continuous basis. This is done by glucose transporters. Despite having a tight blood-brain barrier, the glucose is transported easily from the blood into the brain. Right. Glucose, as I said, is very important for the brain, and therefore when the glucose level goes down, like other metabolites, like other electrolytes like sodium, which are also equally important, oxygen, brain cannot survive. The conscious state is because of a system known as a reticular activating system. It starts in the brainstem and diffuses to both the cortices. So for a person to lose consciousness, either the brainstem should get affected or both the cortices should get affected. If one cortex gets affected, person does not lose consciousness. Either both cortices should get affected, like tumor with the raised intracranial pressure pushing the other side of the brain also, or brainstem like Pontine hemorrhage. This is about the structure. The RA system need not get disrupted only by anatomical or structural lesions. It can be disrupted by metabolic deficiencies also. Example, glucose, oxygen and sodium. When glucose goes down, the RA system gets affected in a diffuse manner. RA system and the brain depends on glucose for its survival. And therefore, when the glucose level goes down, patient from the conscious state goes into a stuporous state and then slowly into comatose state. And therefore, glucose is very, very important in treating a person who is suffering from coma. One of the important treatable causes of coma is hypoglycemia. And therefore, if any person comes in a state of coma to the casualty, the first thing we try to do is to give dextrose. We send the blood for glucose evaluation, and even before we get the report, we start giving dextrose. And once we get the report, we change accordingly. If the sugar is on the higher side, we stop giving it. If it is on the lower side, we continue to give dextrose. If it is still on the higher side, even hyperglycemia also can cause coma. So if it is very much on the higher side, we control it with insulin. So the point to be understood here is that the bottom line is that hypoglycemia is more dangerous than hyperglycemia. So even though hyperglycemia also can produce a comatose state, hypoglycemia is more dangerous and it is killing the patient. Every minute is important. So even if the person is a known diabetic on insulin, even if he is a known diabetic or having high sugar levels, when he comes to a comatose state, we give dextrose. And then depending upon the blood sugar level, we change the treatment accordingly. So one important point to be noted here is that one of the important treatable causes is dextrose. Even if a person has got history of diabetes, we always give dextrose. Even before we complete giving dextrose, person sits and talks to everyone. So satisfying experience. So we should never miss out on a treatable cause. If we miss out on a non-treatable cause like say HIV or tumor, we need not worry, because nothing much can be done for some degenerative conditions also, neurological degenerative conditions. But this is a highly treatable conditions, we should never miss on it. So one of the important treatable cause of coma is hypoglycemia. So the treatment is giving dextrose. But then persons coming in a comatose state but with the history of alcoholism this time, we should be a bit cautious and careful. No doubt we always give dextrose in a person who comes in a comatose state, but persons who are alcoholics and who give history of alcoholism, there could be vitamin B1 deficiency, thiamine deficiency, and therefore when we give dextrose, whatever little thiamine is left out, that will also be utilized in the metabolism of dextrose, and therefore persons may be precipitated to develop Wernicke-Korsakoff psychosis, vitamin B deficiency further. And therefore comatose patients, we send blood for sugar estimation and we give dextrose. But comatose person with history of alcoholism, we first give thiamine, vitamin B1, the company's name is Berin, followed by dextrose, so that we don't precipitate Wernicke-Korsakoff psychosis. Very important point. So whether the person's got history of diabetes or not, any person who comes in a comatose state, we have to give dextrose. Then depending upon the sugar level, we change the treatment accordingly. But with the history of alcoholism, first we give vitamin B1, thiamine, and then followed by dextrose. Right. Seizures. The neuronal hyperexcitability and hypersynchronous discharge. These occur because of an increase in glutamate, the neuroexcitatory substance, or a decrease in the neuroinhibitory substance, gamma aminobutyric acid. So the seizures can be produced either because of structural lesions like abscess, embolism, or sometimes even hemorrhage, or even metabolic causes like hypoglycemia, hypoxemia, hyponatremia. Because as I said earlier in the early part of my discussion, Brain depends so much on oxygen, glucose and sodium for its survival. And therefore, when the nutrients get deprived, there is hyper-excitation and hyper-synchronization, which results in seizures. So one of the common symptomatic forms of seizures, a provoking factor, is hypoglycemia. We have seizures two types, unprovoked seizures and provoked seizures. Two or more unprovoked seizures, we call it as epilepsy. But here there is a provoking factor, provoked seizure. The provocating factor is hypoglycemia. So this we treat it as symptomatic seizures. We give dextrose and correct it. Once the dextrose is corrected, once the seizures are under control, we need not continue with anti-epileptic drugs further. Unlike epilepsy, where we give for a minimum period of 2 to 5 years, and then depending upon the situation, we either continue or stop it. But here, we give only during the symptomatic period where they are prone to develop seizures because of hypoglycemia. Once hypoglycemia is corrected and dextrose is under control and seizures are not seen again, we stop giving anti-epileptic drugs. This is known as a symptomatic form of seizures because of hypoglycemia. Right. Now, we've been talking so much of hypoglycemia, but how do we clinically diagnose hypoglycemia? We can take blood, send it for estimation of sugar, and then we wait for the results to come. But at the bedside, can we diagnose that the person is having hypoglycemia or not? We can. First is the history, second is the examination. History, there is usually history of diabetes mellitus, person taking insulin. So he might have been taking a lot of insulin, or one of the oral hypoglycemic agents which has got a propensity to cause hypoglycemia is sulfonylureas. So there could be a history of sulfonylurea, or there could be a history of insulin intake because of diabetic status, or very commonly because of hunger, where they have no other go because they do not get food to eat, or fasting, where they deliberately do not take food as a fasting purpose. Whatever may be the reason, the glucose goes down. That is the history we get. So the person has taken the breakfast or lunch well, or the person has got history of diabetes on insulin or oral hypoglycemic agents. This is the history we ask. The examination, what we find on examination in persons with hypoglycemia is that Mother Nature has always got a lot of compensatory mechanisms to take place. Mother Nature tries to protect the human body, which is known as homeostasis. If it gets deranged, it tries to bring back to normalcy. Classic example, if the vestibular ocular reflex is overstimulated, goes on one side, it is pushed to the other side by the frontal eye fields. Body always tries to maintain homeostasis. If the blood pressure goes down, we have mechanisms to increase the blood pressure. Likewise, when the blood sugar goes down, there are a lot of compensatory mechanisms occurring in the human body, which are known as counter-regulatory hormones. These hormones try to increase the blood glucose level. Once the blood glucose level goes down, the body senses the hypoglycemic status and tries to increase glucose by releasing the counter-regulatory hormones. The counter-regulatory hormones, namely adrenaline, noradrenaline, cortisol and growth hormone. So when they are released, they increase the blood sugar level. But not only adrenaline and noradrenaline increase the glucose level, it has got other physiological effects. The physiological effects of sympathetic stimulations. So they have increase in pulse rate, they have palpitations, they have lot of sweating. So in a person who is slowly slipping into a drowsy state with palpitations, increased pulse rate, tachycardia and sweating, we can always suspect hypoglycemia and check out with the blood sugar estimation. So clinically we can suspect with the sympathetic stimulation by counter-regulatory hormones, adrenaline and noradrenaline. Yeah. The three most common causes of the death worldwide are myocardial infarction, stroke and cancer. Heart attack, stroke and cancer. And if we see these three disorders, the two disorders, namely the first and second, myocardial infarction and stroke, are because of atherosclerosis. because of vascular narrowing. In fact, the Mother Nature and God has given a very protective mechanism to the brain's perfusion in the form of circle of Willis. You have the vertebra, you have the collateral circulation, you have an anastomosis going on between the vertebro-basal system and carotid system and forms a circle-shaped vessels. So if there's a block in the superior part, blood can come from the inferior part and compensate. If there's a block in the inferior part, blood can come from the superior part and can compensate. Despite this protection in the form of circle of Willis, ischemic stroke is the second commonest cause of death. Imagine this excellent protection were not to be there, perhaps ischemic stroke would have been the commonest cause of death. So, myocardial infarction, stroke, ischemic stroke and cancer are the three common causes of death, the most common cause of death. And the myocardial infarction and ischemic stroke are related to atherosclerosis, narrowing of the vessels. One of the important risk factors for atherosclerosis is diabetes, high glucose levels. The others being hypertension, smoking, alcoholism and dyslipidemia. So diabetes is one of the important risk factors for atherosclerosis. In fact, there's going to be explosion of persons having diabetes in near future, and therefore as the diabetes is going to increase, the number of patients suffering from atherosclerosis and thence myocardial infarction and ischemic stroke are also going to increase. So again, glucose plays a very important role in the development of atherosclerosis and mortality in the form of myocardial infarction and stroke, ischemic stroke. High glucose level, diabetes, is also one of the important risk factors in the development of neuropathy, nerve involvement, nerve damage. In fact, when we approach a person suffering from neuropathy, we go by rule of 1/3. What is this rule of 1/3? 1/3 of peripheral neuropathy is due to diabetes. 1/3 of peripheral neuropathy is due to diabetes, and 1/3 of the causes of peripheral neuropathy are due to other causes. And 1/3, despite extensive evaluation, we are not able to identify the cause. So 1/3 of the causes of peripheral neuropathy is due to diabetes and high glucose level. In fact, this is a chronic process. There is a history of diabetes running on for many years for the nerves to get affected and develop diabetic neuropathy. Diabetic neuropathy is basically an axonal type of neuropathy, a length dependent neuropathy where the distal parts get affected. The glove and stocking type of sensory loss, muscle weakness in the distal muscles and reflexes lost in the distal and then coming to the proximal areas. They are known as length dependent neuropathy because when the axon gets affected, the nutrients cannot travel to the most distal parts, and then as the disease worsens, more and more proximal parts gets affected. So glove and stocking type of sensory loss, the distal parts on the upper limbs are the hands and the distal parts on the lower limbs are the feet, and then up to the level of knees. So they start worsening coming from the feet to the knees and then hands. One important clinical concept to differentiate between hysterical type of sensory loss and genuine diabetic neuropathy type of sensory loss is that once the sensory loss has come up to the level of the knees, the fingertips also should start getting affected. And if a person says there's a sensory loss knee and up to thighs but the fingers being normal, it cannot be a diabetic sensory neuropathy or diabetic neuropathy. So diabetic neuropathy and neuropathy because of diabetes is one of the important neurological manifestations of a high glucose level and glucose. It produces an axonal type of neuropathy. Yeah. Diabetes is also important, especially in the management of infections, especially fungal infections of the nervous system. The fungal infections of the nervous system, like fungal meningitis, they thrive more when the persons are immunocompromised or a high glucose level diabetes. So control of sugar again is essential to control of infections, especially fungal infections of the nervous system. Sugar and stroke. One of the very effective treatments for ischemic stroke is tissue plasminogen activator thrombolytic therapy in the first 3 hours extended to 4.5 hours. But one important criteria is that as soon as a person comes with manifestations of stroke, like one side hemiparesis, we take obviously CT scan to rule out hemorrhage, but the other important test we perform is random blood sugar level, because hypoglycemia is one of the strongest stroke mimics. Hypoglycemia is one of the strongest stroke mimics, and therefore when a person presents with hemiparesis, when we take a CT scan and rule out hemorrhage, we cannot directly proceed with thrombolytic therapy, because the hemiparesis may not be because of hemorrhage, because you are ruling out by CT scan, but maybe because of hypoglycemia. And for a person who is just having hypoglycemia which has resulted in hemiparesis, going ahead with thrombolysis is going to be big mistake, a big blunder. So when a person comes with hemiplegia and acute manifestation of stroke, after doing CT and ruling out hemorrhage, we have to check out on the blood sugar level. Only when the blood sugar level is normal and other indications are satisfied, then only we proceed with thrombolytic therapy. Very important. Without blood sugar level, I repeat, without blood sugar level, we should not proceed with thrombolytic therapy. After all, it could be because of hypoglycemia, and we are doing a grave mistake and blunder by thrombolysing a person who is just having a simple hypoglycemia. All we could have done is to give dextrose, person would have become normal. So hypoglycemia is one of the strongest stroke mimics, and we have to be very, very careful about this. Person has got ischemic stroke. We are treating it, fine, a large infarct. Ischemic stroke means a decreased blood supply to the brain, hypoperfusion to the brain. And on top of it, if the person has got diabetes and hyperglycemia, because of hypoxemic conditions, all this glucose will take on the anaerobic metabolism and lactic acid will produce, and it is going to aggravate the ischemic stroke and the health of the patient further. So again, glucose plays a very important role. In stroke, especially ischemic stroke, the control of sugar is essential. So when the person is admitted, we have to give insulin and try to control sugar, because with ischemia already the brain is infarcted, and if a person has got lot of sugar, the hypoxemic conditions will use the anaerobic metabolism, lactic acid will get produced, acidic environment will be created, and it will further impair the person's health. So control of sugar is very important, and again blood glucose level plays a very important role in terms of stroke. So hypoglycemia can be a strong mimic, and hyperglycemia can worsen the outcome of ischemic stroke patients, and we need to control the sugar levels. Hypoglycemia we've been talking about. Even hyperglycemia can sometimes present with neurological manifestations. One of the important manifestations of hyperglycemia, especially non-ketotic hyperglycemia, is to present with involuntary movements, especially chorea, hemibalismus. So very, very common presentation is hemibalismus or chorea and athetosis. So a person who is presenting with chorea with a history of diabetes always suspect hyperglycemia and control, because non-ketotic hyperglycemia is one of the most common causes of chorea. We should always rule out hyperglycemia, especially non-ketotic hyperglycemia. Cerebrospinal fluid. As I said, the sugar is very, very important for the brain, and therefore we have special glucose transporter systems across the blood-brain barrier and across the blood-CSF barrier. Because of these transporters, sugar enters from the blood into the CSF. But when there are infections, bacterial, tuberculosis, or fungal infections, lot of inflammatory substances are released, and these inflammatory substances and the organisms, microorganisms also will metabolize and utilize glucose, and therefore CSF glucose comes down. So again, glucose plays a very important role. If there's a CSF glucose decreased, we can always suspect bacterial meningitis where it is very much decreased, or tuberculous meningitis where it is moderately decreased, or fungal meningitis where it is mildly decreased. In viral meningitis, CSF sugar is normal. So again, sugar plays a very important role, CSF sugar, in differentiating between various forms of infections. Pyogenic very much decreased, tuberculosis moderately decreased, fungal mildly decreased, and viral infection no decrease at all. So with CSF sugar, we can even differentiate a type of CNS infections. CSF rhinorrhea. Persons may be having head injury, they may be having skull fractures. So the CSF may be leaking from the nose, what we call it as CSF rhinorrhea. So then again there's a doubt whether it is CSF rhinorrhea coming or whether it is a nasal discharge which is coming out. Very important to differentiate, because if it is CSF rhinorrhea, we need to take a neurosurgery help and try to treat the condition. If it is a simple nasal discharge, we need not worry. So how do we differentiate? Again, glucose plays a very important role. As I said, glucose is present in the CSF. So when there is CSF rhinorrhea, there will be, if we test for glucose, there will be glucose in the secretions. So if there is a glucose in the secretions, it is CSF rhinorrhea. If there is no glucose in the secretions, then it is just a simple nasal discharge. The second important point is that CSF has got glucose, but there is not much protein, whereas nasal secretions have lot of protein, and therefore when we take a handkerchief and immerse in these secretions, because nasal secretions has got lot of proteins, it will make the handkerchief stick together, so it becomes sticky. Whereas if it is CSF, since there are not much proteins, the handkerchief does not get stuck, it is not sticky. So these are the two ways by which we can differentiate whether it is CSF rhinorrhea or just plain nasal discharge. So far we've been trying to understand so many important factors, so many important neurological conditions where glucose plays a vital role. In fact, brain depends so much on glucose that special transport systems are created so that the glucose goes from the blood-brain barrier and blood CSF barrier to enter into the brain and CSF, and brain and CSF need glucose on a continuous basis. So that is the importance of glucose, and the glucose disorders can produce various neurological disorders. I hope you have enjoyed listening to my lecture. If you have any suggestions or comments, kindly post onto my YouTube channel. But please like and subscribe my YouTube channel, Dr. Sreenivas Medical Concepts, and my FB page, Dr. Sreenivas Concepts. Thank you. Bye.